Hey internet friends, most of you watching are in fact American. So close your eyes and imagine a future where the US dollar isn't the main currency used for trade and banking around the world. In this future, oil isn't always bought and sold with dollars. The petrodollar isn't used as a global hegemony, and as a result, the balance of economic power on the world stage changes in a big way, certainly fulfilling one of the World Economic Forum's predictions for 2030. And these changes could affect the prices we see on the housing market or at the grocery store because they directly affect the purchasing power of our dollar. The US-Saudi petrodollar agreement, which was signed in 1974, was a major economic and political deal that shaped the world's banking system. The oil crisis of 1973 was a huge turning point that started with the Yom Kippur War, otherwise known as the Fourth Arab-Israeli War. As a result, the Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries, they put an oil ban on Western countries that supported Israel. And so the price of oil tripled, which sent shockwaves through the U.S. economy, resulting in inflation and fuel shortages. The result also yielded in oil-producing countries becoming more powerful in the global theater. After 1973, the U.S. and Saudi Arabia came to an agreement to keep the oil market stable and make sure that the U.S. and its allies would always have oil. As a part of this deal, Saudi Arabia and other OPEC members decided to price and sell their oil in U.S. dollars. Otherwise known as the petrodollar, this meant that any country that wanted to buy oil from these companies had to first get U.S. dollars, which made the U.S. dollar basically, the default currency for this purchase. The confidence to exchange it for goods and services across the world and all that. In exchange for this deal, the U.S. gave Saudi Arabia military aid, becoming its ally and investing in its future, which included keeping its oil fields safe since the U.S. had a vested interest. Saudi Arabia also agreed to put its extra petrodollars into U.S. government debt instruments like treasury notes, helping pay for U.S. debts and keeping the financial system strong. For a while at least, for 50 years at least. Up until recently, the U.S.-Saudi oil agreement strengthened the U.S. dollar and established the petrodollar as the world's main reserve currency. That's the point I'm getting at. The deal strengthened the U.S.'s relationship with Saudi Arabia as a key ally in the Middle East and also gave the U.S. control over the world oil market and international finances, establishing the U.S. as a superpower. I guess we could also boil down all of these events to the following. The Federal Reserve, which is not actually federal, not a government institution, but a private company with private interests, and an institution that has historically been based out of London, Paris, Geneva, Frankfurt, and maybe a little dash of Israel. They control the U.S. dollar. The institution is a group of shadow bankers that include, these names like the Rothschild and the Rockefellers, not limited to those people, but those are the people you'd recognize. And they own the dollar. They control the dollar. And they partnered with the Saudis for the last 50 years. Now the Saudis have quit. They haven't renewed the agreement. So now the dollar, which was backed by gold originally in the beginning, then backed by oil, is backed by nothing. Saudi Arabia's choice not to renew this deal and instead work more closely with the BRICS countries like China and Russia. This all points to a possible break from this long-standing system. They haven't renewed the agreement and there are no new rules in place. The agreement with Saudi Arabia has not been renewed by the Biden government. And since there isn't a policy update yet, Saudi Arabia can start selling oil in any currency they like, any currency they want. And it's been reported, not by U.S. media, of course, but it's been reported that the preferred currencies for this trade, for the sale of oil, are those from the BRICS countries, like the Chinese yuan. What I'm trying to say here is this move could make the U.S. dollar less important in international trade and banking, which would put the U.S.'s economic power that it's had for decades on the back burner. After all, if the dollar isn't backed by gold or oil or anything tangible, what's it backed by? What value does it have? This thing we all spend our lives working for. The end of the petrodollar agreement with Saudi Arabia is a big change in the world's politics because it could lead to a new age of trading oil in more than one currency and a rebalancing of economic power around the world. There have been efforts to debunk this information and label it as fake news, the leading effort coming from one of the members of the World Economic Forum. And it's all very tedious, saying that firstly, Saudi Arabia did not officially sign an agreement with the U.S. on that specific date in June. That's been reported, June 9th. And that the agreement they did sign didn't officially state that they had to sell exclusively in petrodollars from that point forward. There have been articles saying that even the term petrodollar is a conspiracy theory. Paul Donovan, a British chief economist at UBS Global Wealth Management and member of the World Economic Forum, noted in a blog post on Friday that this story had unexpectedly gained traction and offered yet another warning about the dangers of confirmation bias in this blog post. He said, quote, "Clearly, the story that is going around today is fake news. There was an agreement signed in June of 1974, but it had nothing to do with currencies because Saudis carried on selling in British pounds after that." End quote. Donovan failed to mention that the Saudis stopped selling in British pounds in 1975, a year later. The Saudis sold oil in British pounds for a whole year after they teamed up with the petrodollar, so he's debunking this based on a technicality to dunk on conspiracy theories. But here are the facts. The U.S. decoupling from the gold standard gave rise to the petrodollar system. Prior to it, the U.S. had, as a result of the Bretton Woods Agreement, pegged its currency to the price of gold at $35 an ounce. But U.S. President Nixon broke that deal in 1971. Then the Fourth Arab War happened, Arab-Israeli War happened. I already explained the aftermath, and a deal was struck between the Saudis and the Americans. The deal's basic premise was that the U.S. would purchase oil from Saudi Arabia in exchange for arming and assisting its military. The Saudis would send petrodollars back into the U.S. economy to pay off U.S. debt in exchange. This was a Henry Kissinger deal. And after this deal, you see the rise of the petrodollar and dollar dominance. That's why the U.S. has had a steady supply of oil, and that's why Saudi Arabia is protected by the U.S. Just so you understand, this video will still probably get flagged, but all these fact checkers are swarming, so I have to cross my T's and dot my I's. Saudi Arabia mainly dealt in petrodollars, but Saudi Arabia can now sell its oil and get paid in yuan, euros, rubles, yen, according to India Today, their report. And Saudi Arabia is also thinking about using virtual currency like Bitcoin for transactions, according to this report. It's important to note that the Saudi currency is pegged to the US dollar at a constant rate of exchange. But the Central Bank of Saudi Arabia has joined Project mBridge, a cross-border trial using CBDCs, or central bank digital currency, for global trade. So that connection to the US dollar might soon be severed. I'm quoting directly from this article about Project mBridge, the innovation section of the Bank for International Settlements. And the central banks of China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and the United Arab Emirates collaborated on Project mBridge, which was started in 2021. The project seeks to assess the viability of central bank digital currencies for real-time cross-border trade and payments. All these factors point to Saudi Arabia and over 40 other countries that are part of the BRICS conglomerate stepping away from the petrodollar. What do you think, Internet friends? I always look forward to reading your comments. Thank you so much for watching, subscribing, and buying my book, The Deep State Encyclopedia. Bye.